the City Fathers want to increase Bristol's exposure to tourism, they invoke sites such as the Bristol Suspension Bridge or events such as the Balloon Fiesta over the Downs. But in 1923, an incident took place that exposed the dark side of family life. Over to you, James, to describe it.
Louisa Cooper, wife of George Cooper, went to see the managing director, Frank Sampson, of Sampson & Sons Limited, with an alarming story. The night before, George had returned to the house at about 8 p.m. after having a drink with a friend. He started an argument with her which turned violent, and their son, also called George, had to intervene on behalf of his mother. In a rage, the father picked up his coat and left the house, and had not been seen since. The Coopers lived in Montrose Avenue in Brislington. Among the other residents were the son, his wife, and a young baby, with one on the way. His wife moved to Cheddar to be with her own mother ahead of her confinement. There was also a lodger, a Mr. Baker. But there was a dark side here. The father had a distinctly unpleasant nature. He had a hot temper which could turn violent. Instead of engaging in a rational debate, he would smash the place up. He was abusive to his long-suffering wife, who was seen on occasion sporting a black eye. Her own brother had even threatened to give him a good hiding. Aside from being a domestic bully, he was a born-again womanizer and was candid about his behaviour. He even invited one of his mistresses to the family home and expected his wife to wait on her. At one point, Mrs. Cooper visited the management of Sampson & Sons to complain about her husband's relationship with the cleaner, a Mrs. Goodman. He claimed overtime on Saturday afternoon while she was on duty. But more damning was his decision to pay for her to go on the works outing. Whether they sat together is a moot point, but as a result she was dismissed. On the 10th of January 1924, the son took over the tenancy of the house in the absence of his own father. He also took over his father's job as a pattern maker for Sampson's. George Cooper's disappearance did not go without notice. Mother and son gave differing accounts to various people. He was either working away from home or had run away with another woman. These were interesting revelations for a man who, one night, had picked up his coat and left. Eventually the truth came out. In some vintage murders, the culprit normally walks into the police station and reveals all, but this was very different. The son visited his uncle and aunt, George and Elizabeth Blackburn, and he admitted to his aunt that he had killed his father after an argument. This put the Blackburns in an awkward position, as he had admitted to killing his aunt's brother, and George Blackburn surely was not going to go to prison for a nephew who was not of the same blood. Instead of going to the police, they consulted with a friend who was an ex-policeman. He went to the relevant authorities, and Mrs. Cooper and her son were arrested. The charges were that the son had murdered his father, and Mrs. Cooper was an accessory. They were denied bail, and George Jr. went to Hallfield Prison in Bristol, while his mother was sent to Cardiff. The police made a thorough search of the house, and discovered under the floorboards of the living room the decomposed body of the husband, wrapped in sacking and covered with lime and tar. The family were not so much dancing on the old man's grave as sitting on it. The initial post-mortem examination was carried out by Dr. McClelland and Dr. Cochrane, who concluded that the deceased had suffered severe head injuries caused by a hatchet. A number of these were found in the shed. The body was released for burial at Brislington Cemetery. The coroner's inquest was adjourned until the 18th of February to allow for further inquiries to be made. By this time, the Home Office had intervened and insisted that the body be exhumed and be examined by their famed pathologist, Sir Bernard Spilsbury. In a macabre scene worthy of a Hammer horror film, the body was dug up in the early hours of the 17th of February, in the presence of Sir Bernard, a policeman, 2 gravediggers, and a newspaperman. The decomposed corpse was sent to Bristol mortuary to be further looked into. The new post-mortem was conducted by Sir Bernard in the presence of the city coroner, 2 senior police officers from the local constabulary, and the 2 original doctors who first examined the corpse. They were joined later by Dr. Headley Hill, who was acting for the accused. The defending solicitor, Mr. Watson, claimed that he was never called to the exhumation. This was disputed by the coroner. He later stated that he was not able to see the original doctor's report and claimed there were irregular proceedings by the Crown authorities. This did not have any effect, as the coroner's court was adjourned a number of times until the 24th of March 1923, while Sir Bernard Spilsbury made his conclusions about what he had found regarding the corpse. Sir Bernard's conclusion did not contradict those of the original doctors, and he was not asked to give evidence at the trial. Basically, the father had been attacked with extreme violence by a weapon with a cutting edge of 4 inches. It would render the victim incapacitated. So who was the murderer? Despite Mr. Watson still protesting that he was unable to cross-examine the original doctors, the coroner's jury were permitted to question the evidence of the policeman, Sergeant Carter, who had apprehended the son. His version was that the father returned home in the evening whilst the mother was absent. He seemed to have fallen into a rage and broken porcelain in anger and smashed eggs on the floor. He then began to quarrel with his son over the mess. The father had stated at the time that his wife would have known the reason on her return. The implication was that she would be assaulted when she came home. George Jr. had told his father that he was not to touch his mother. But, as in all family quarrels, the accusations drifted away from the original charge. In this case, it concerned the cleaning lady, Mrs. Goodman. The father told his son that there was going to be only one man in this house, and showed him to the door. The son refused to budge, and the father picked up a cast-iron fire ornament and threw it at him. The son ducked and kicked his father in the thigh, causing him to collapse on the floor. He then left and went into the living room, where he played the piano. His father, in the meantime, went out of the house and picked up a hatchet from the shed and returned to the living room in order to attack his son. The 2 men grabbed each other, and the son was able to grab the weapon. In the struggle, he hit his father on the head. When the mother returned, George Jr. claimed that he'd had a row with his father and that he had left. Later that evening, he went to his mother's bedroom and confessed that he had killed his father. The jury were assured that the confession had been made voluntarily. At long last, Mr. Watson was able to cross-examine one of the original doctors, Dr. McClelland, regarding the pathology evidence. The coroner said it was irrelevant, and this was accepted by the jury. Additionally, the jury decided it was not necessary to call Sir Bernard Spilsbury, as it had already been discovered that death had been caused by a blow to the head. Prior to the jury giving their verdict, Mr. Watson brought up the question of malice aforethought. Did the son deliberately seek to kill his father? The jury deliberated for an hour and a half and returned a verdict of wilful murder by George, but added a rider that he had acted under great provocation and had acted in a moment of passion. The coroner said that the question of manslaughter was the preserve of another court. The next stage was an appearance before the magistrates in Keynsham. Mr. Watson was in combative form and accused the police of contradictory statements and complained about the behaviour of Somerset Police and the Home Office. All to no avail, as mother and son were committed for trial at Somerset Assizes in Wells on the 29th of May 1924, before Mr. Justice Sherman. The charges against the son were wilful murder with his mother as an accessory. The key person was George. In the witness box he repeated his assertion that he had killed his father but was acting in self-defence. His mother did not give evidence. In the closing speeches, the prosecution were told of wilful murder, whilst the defence insisted that he had killed his father but had acted in self-defence. The judge gave the jury 3 alternatives: not guilty if done in self-defence, guilty of manslaughter if there was no premeditation, or wilful murder. If the jury found him guilty of wilful murder, the judge would have no alternative but to don the black cap and sentence George Jr. to the gallows. In the case of manslaughter and being an accessory to a felony, the judge had discretion as to the sentence. The jury retired for 3/4 of an hour before delivering their verdict. The son was found guilty of manslaughter and his mother being an accessory. The judge turned to Mrs. Cooper and was very sympathetic to her plight. He noted that she had served 8 weeks in prison and bound her over to keep the peace. The son had to wait a day for his sentence to be determined. He was given 7 years. The judge noted that George had acted under major provocation, but emphasised the severity of the wound to the father. At the time, it's considered a light sentence, and the judge would be described in today's tabloids in a bad light. After his eventual release, George continued to live in Bristol and is thought to have died in 1984. Judges in the years before the abolition of capital punishment had no alternative if the culprit was found guilty of wilful murder, had to don the black cap and begin the process to the gallows. They could not commute the sentence to imprisonment. The only person who could spare a man from the gallows was the Home Secretary. He had only to scribble on the file the phrase, "Justice must take its course," and the culprit would be in the afterlife within a matter of weeks. But human emotions are still there, and jealousy and rows will never go away. We may sadly see more examples of patricide in the future. Perhaps if George had immediately gone to the police, rather than burying Dad in unconsecrated ground, or in this case, under the floorboards, would he have got away with self-defence? The father was a well-known bully and capable of attacking his son.